2, 3, and...
Obviously the main mission coming out here was to get the rest of my big stack of larch or tamarack or hackmatack or whatever you locally call it for planking on Rosalind, but Josh here cuts all kinds of other stuff too, so I'm also picking up beautiful clear North American white oak stock for cap rails and probably engine beds and other like heavy duty structural stuff that needs to be hard wearing. He's also come by some really quite nice, mostly clear, fairly tight grain white pine of a grade that you don't see every day, and widths and dimensions and things that you don't see every day. So I'm having a look through some of that as well. Not entirely sure what I'm going to use it for. Things like interior trim, bulkheads, bunks, things that are mostly out of the weather. White pine is, I think, more durable than people tend to give it credit for, but also it does prefer to be out of the weather. It doesn't last as long as some other things if it's in full exposure. So, but it's great for all kinds of other stuff, and it's relatively light. It's wonderful to work with. It's not nearly as hard on your tools as most of the things that I work with on a more regular basis. So just having a look through this stack here. Get a load of this one. So obviously this has the pith, the heart of the tree in it, so that's not the greatest thing for a lot of stuff, but doesn't necessarily rule it out, especially in a non-structural application. If it's, you know, if it's interior somewhere, as long as I can dry it appropriately, that's something that will tend to check and crack out if you let it dry too quickly. So I'm going to need to get this under cover somewhere, put away, but or, you know, ultimately I might end up just ripping it up the middle, down the pith, and not using that width, but using these two really beautiful courtesan pieces that are on either side of it, which there's a lot of value in that too. But yeah, also check a lot of this. There's oak of this quality, definitely you don't see every day. This is incredibly beautiful stuff, which these thicker pieces are going to go towards cap rail and you know, deck level hard wearing structural stuff, and then these thinner bits probably interior and rigging bits and pieces, any kind of hardware that I have to build up top that needs to be hard wearing, it'd be good for that too. Yeah, so I like to So I'm looking for usable width that is beyond the sapwood and the bark, and free of defects, and looking at the, you know, the ring count, the ring density. You know, this is like these are trees that grew at a kind of a medium rate. That it's fairly tight. You know, it's plenty tight enough for just about anything. And you know, some of these, I mean, that's quite a bit tighter than I usually see in white pine, certainly in Connecticut, these guys. This is a little looser, obviously, but still very usable for all sorts of things, especially inside the boat, which obviously I've been focusing entirely on the outside of the boat, but that will change at some point, and there's a lot of things to do in there. it's gonna eat up a lot of wood. So yeah, I definitely like the look of these ones here. They've got a nice usable width to them. Nice ring density. Very few defects. Very useful thickness to them. It's about, you know, it's a little over an inch thick, which, you know, is kind of your go-to for a lot of stuff. About an inch thick. You know, building bulkheads, building parts of seats and bunks in the galley, and framework around water tanks, and, you know, whatever. Yeah, so yeah, I guess we've got to open this pile up. So what I'm loading up right now are, again, larch or hackmatack or tamarack or whatever you locally call this, knees that Josh goes out into the swamps here and harvests. And the only thing that's changed about how one does that today is you have a machine like this to help you, and a chainsaw, but it's the same process that it's always been, and what you get are these beautiful sweeps of the natural grain growing in these shapes that if you're working with solid timber, this is really it's definitely the best, and in many cases it's the only way of adding, you know, this amount of strength to bracing something where two timbers come together like this. without using something that's made of metal, whether it's bronze or steel or whatever, which wouldn't be appropriate for my boat or my budget. So I love that he's doing this, and as far as I know, he's really the only person that's doing this on any kind of serious level anymore. There used to be a guy up in Maine that did this in relatively recent years, but he passed away, and before him, it's been a while since there's been anything like a commercial process for getting this type of material. I've done a bit of going out in the woods and harvesting this stuff myself, but without really being serious about it and being set up with the right equipment and work process to do it, it's incredibly difficult and grueling, as I can attest, as my father can attest, because I roped him into helping me one time. Yeah, it's definitely hard work, and I'm incredibly grateful that Josh is doing this kind of thing, because it's not easy to get this kind of thing. Yeah, these aren't even the good ones. Just look at that. So the strength. Yeah. So the strength of a piece of wood comes from its longitudinal grain. You think about it, a piece of wood is sort of like a bundle of straws. It will be strong along its run, but not particularly strong across its run. I don't know if that made sense. That's not the greatest way of explaining it, but it's what I've got. So having these grown shapes is just incredibly strong. Yeah, I'm really happy to be able to get this kind of thing and put it in the boat.
But in these boreal swamps that I'm in, there's no rocks.
Right.
So everyone always asks, like,
that's beautiful.
Because I just plunge the saw down.
Yeah.
And then I just let the rooster tail of water and mud.
Yeah.
And I walk around, and so I make this, and it's almost like this orthoscopic, incision I make to pull the root out. And but yeah, I can. Sometimes I get into an area where it's not ideal, and I'll go through a couple chains, but more often than not, depending on how many hours I'm out there, 1, maybe 2 chains, and that's for 4 or 5 hours of cutting.
That's awesome.
So, it definitely, cutting out in that situation, it's a pleasant surprise.
Well, I really hope that next time I come out here, the world has become a more pleasant place to be in, and we can go out in the swamp, and I'd love to have.
I was thinking
have
about some way of trying to make that work, and the problem is taxiing, together with that rig. Is where I'm.
Yep.
It's
not responsible at this point. Yep. but this is
turn
beautiful.
More of an adventure than you want.
Yeah, but hopefully next time.
This is going to be a semi-annual thing.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Hello, I'm Josh Swan. Welcome to my boat shop. I build and restore wooden boats, and I also harvest and mill boat timber, primarily from northern Wisconsin, but Wisconsin more broadly, just with an emphasis on local boat building woods. So this is my shop. It's kind of a one-man, sort of a crackerjack operation, but it It's served me really well to stay fairly lean. I built this shop about 10 years ago. It's still not quite done. It's a bit of a work in progress, but it's on our property. I'm able to live just about, a few hundred yards from where I work, which is really nice. And yeah, I bring in, largely plank on frame boats, wood canvas canoes, and then also I build small plank on frame boats from 13 to 20 feet, give or take. So that's kind of my primary focus. I went to boat school at the International Yacht Restoration School. This was a long time ago now. I'm getting a little long in the tooth. This was in 2000. I moved there. I grew up in west central Wisconsin, in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Moved out there after high school, really because I had an interest in woodworking. And I felt like if I learned how to build a wooden boat, those skills would be relevant and transferable. But then I just really fell in love with the rules and the discipline of working on boats, the logic. I know it feels really mysterious, the shapes and curves and dealing with things that aren't square. But in practice, it's way simpler than building a set of kitchen cabinets, for example. There's no one step of boat building is out of reach. It's a sequence of steps, and it's just knowing that sequence and knowing how one step relates to another. And it's really fun to show people, say for example, steam bending wood or spiling a plank, and to see that light bulb go off for them, and and they can have them deconstruct and or construct this three-dimensional shape. This complex three-dimensional shape, it's really satisfying. So I moved out there, again, not as a sailor or not as a person who wanted to spend a bunch of time on the water so much as I wanted to be in a shop, woodworking, and again, working on, there's nothing I'd rather do than work on boats. I feel like I see something different in wood as a boat builder, especially out cutting and harvesting, as well as milling, but let's start with the forest first. There's other loggers around here that get a kick out of the fact that I'm the only person who wants crooked logs. And so looking at, say, cedar, for example, finding trees that have a sweep or a curve, it might not be desirable for somebody who's sawing dimensional lumber, but I know that I can lay that log on my sawmill bed in such a way to yield really nice planking stock. And by hand cutting and not using a mechanical harvester, I can really lay out, once I've fallen that tree, I can lay out and hand cut that to length that makes sense. Well, it's both in terms of the best yield of that material, but then also how it might work for boat planking. I've got some cedar over here, and in fact, this is a little pram that our sons and I were building. It's sort of a COVID boat. We started it in spring, mothballed it for the summer, and a little bit this fall, but we're just starting to kind of pick back up with it as we turn into late fall, and we're just spending more time in the shop. But you can see here, here's some planking stock. So here's a tree. This is a cedar that I cut in the winter out in a swamp, and you can see, it's got this curve to it, which for planking a boat is really desirable. I can put my planking pattern on this and minimize grain run out. So I'm having to eliminate trying to scarf pieces together to achieve, where I'm keeping the grain parallel with the planking. So when I'm out in the woods, cutting as a boat builder, it was always a little tough to find the materials I wanted and to communicate that both with loggers and sawmills. And it's not their fault. It's just a difference in market. What they need to sell to. Be it pulpwood, hardwood markets, lumber. This just doesn't fit in with how they can make money. So it's no fault of their own. It's just we need slightly, it's in our sort of vestigial trade, we need lumber that's cut a little differently. Same with bending stock or framing stock. So milling white oak, for example, milling that full taper sawing or milling it parallel to the bark, looking for trees with, in terms of the growth rings, wider growth rings on hardwoods, evenly spaced, that I know is going to be really strong for steam bending, and milling it again to reduce grain run out so that I can sell wood to someone and they can have the greatest chance of success in terms of steam bending and not having frames break. And then also not having to dig through a pile of, say, 1x8s or 1x10s of hardwood stock and try and coax framing stock, out of pieces that just really aren't cut that way. It's also wasteful in a way. And so it's, for me to be able to sell boat building lumber that's been cut for boat builders to boat builders, it's a much more efficient use of the material as well. So, it's been, like I said, there's always been a little bit of a shortcoming in terms of how and where I can get suitable building materials. The genesis of all this started with the fact that I needed some Tamarack knees for a boat project in here many years ago. And Newman G out in Maine had passed away a few years prior. And so we've got a lot of Tamarack in northern Wisconsin. And I was able to make some connections and harvest some. And it worked great, and I really loved it. And it just kind of took off from there pretty organically with acquaintances and friends that I knew out east who needed some. And I went from a chainsaw mill to a smaller wood miser, and just recently upgraded to a bigger sawmill operation especially for handling much bigger, long timbers for backbone stock. Just really increasing my capacity. And I've always liked this side, this primary processing side of things. I've always really enjoyed it. When at Iris, we would take field trips. I can recall visiting, say, Jim Aaron, who was a sawyer in northwestern Massachusetts. Actually, I tried twice to see if he would hire me. And I understand now why he didn't, because I would not want to hire someone. It's dangerous, and I'm sort of set up in a way that works for me and is safe, but I wouldn't, I can understand why he wouldn't want to introduce, some moving part in the form of a 19-year-old Yahoo from Wisconsin into his operation. But I always like that side of things, and so it feels really good to have this be a growing aspect of the shop. And so to be in here in the wintertime when it's really cold, and as I get older I'm sort of turning super soft, but and then focus on the harvesting and milling spring, summer, and fall, and really have that seasonality to my work. So Andrew got in touch with me about needing a larch planking or close proximity. There's a slight difference in species, genus and species, but it's very closely related to the European larch, which was what Rosalind was planked in originally. And so we've got just great stands of Tamarack in Wisconsin. They're really slow growing. So the rings per inch count, I have some stock I can show you. You almost need a magnifying glass to count the annual rings, and so it's just packed with resin. It's a great wood. It's really underutilized for a couple of reasons. One being that where it grows, it's really hard to harvest with bigger processing equipment. It's in these boreal swamps, these kind of bogs, and so they're sort of bottomless in a way. And unless they freeze over in such a way to be able to drive heavier equipment on them, I mean, you could sink a piece of equipment and it'll just go down forever. So cutting in them gets a little tricky, and that's why I just hand cut and have a real light operation, both for cost and also for practical reasons. But the timber itself, again, it's just really, really good. It's great boat building stock. It's got the side hardness. It's really strong. It doesn't dent. It's not soft like a cedar. The specific gravity, it's heavier. So it's really strong. It's super rot resistant. It also steam bends really well, which I was excited to hear about that. I haven't steam bent it really much at all, and I was curious to know how it was going to go. And Andrew had great luck, especially on his garboards, which were, just had a real severe twist in the ends. I mean, basically, they were like propellers in terms of how they went from the bottom and then turned into the hood ends and the stems. And the other good news about Tamarack right now, especially in this region, is that it's regenerating. It's not affected by deer browse, where say white cedar, I tell people when I cut it, and this is how I feel, I sort of feel like I'm mining it, simply because it's just not regenerating, largely due to the number of deer on the landscape. There's just a severe deer impact in terms of browse, and there's just no, like no younger age classes of cedar regenerating. I'm sure you've seen it when you've driven on roads, and cedars just look perfectly pruned, and that's deer impact. And it's not just a problem in the Midwest. Tamarack isn't browsed by deer, and right now, in terms of other factors, be it larch sawfly and some other things that are affecting Tamarack in other parts of the country, we're thankfully, right now anyway, not affected by those. So it's been really satisfying to go into where I've cut and done sort of kind of a crackerjack version of north-south strip cuts in terms of regen, promoting regen. It's been really satisfying to go in after 6-7 years and see this, these tamaracks growing and putting on not a ton of growth just because of where they are, but opening them up, opening that canopy up to get them some sunlight. They're putting on 6-8 inches a year of growth, and so it's been fun to see that. So that's in my mind, that's another really good reason to use Tamarack, is that it, at least until it's not, it's regenerating. It feels somewhat renewable. Sigurd Olsen, who was he actually taught at Northland for a while, and well-known nature, environmentalist, essayist. Anyway, he has this 3 or 4 page essay in this book, The Singing Wilderness. Oh yeah, here's the cover for it. This is the cover off another old one someone gave me the copy for, and he's got a 3 or 4 page essay called Smoky Gold that is very worth reading. So I just enjoy reading that. It just kind of reminds me of how special it is to be out there, and just to not take for granted, those trees. Again, I mean, I'm cutting something that's 10, 12 inches DBH, so diameter breast height, and it could be, I mean, here, 110 years old. Here's an example of, so you've got, the rings per inch count. Maybe no, that side, this side will be good. I mean, it's not a very big diameter tree. I mean, there's close to the pith, and it was still growing. There's still good sapwood there, but you can definitely see. I mean, it's just growing very slowly. So the resin. I mean, you can just the weight of this, and this is as dry as it's ever going to be in terms of being air dried, and it makes great. I mean, the biggest liability is that it doesn't get super big, but because it's so slow growing, the planks are superior to something that would be wide and fast growing anyway. So I mean, I think there's different approaches in terms of how one might go about using this material to really work to its strengths in terms of construction. You just have to line the boat off a little differently, or there's it's sort of a no problems only solutions. There's a way to use smaller diameter stock that's far superior and end up with a really good product, even if you're not using these big, fat and sassy, wide planks, just largely for convenience. But anyway, it's just great material.
It is. Thank you so much for your work and for everything, for your hospitality. It's lovely as it was before, and I hope this will become a recurring thing.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, for a couple reasons. It feels very mutually beneficial, and just a lot of fun. It's really, I enjoy It's fun to talk shop, and I'm excited about your project. I'm super impressed with the progress. I mean, that's, boy, I'm just tired of looking at it. That's very ambitious, but boy, you've proven that, you'll execute it well. I mean, you've gotten so far. So, no, excited that some Badger State lumber make its way out east and be in these really neat projects. That feels super satisfying. Larch, hackmatack, Laricina. Oh, can you edit that out of there? I mispronounced that. So Andrew got in touch with me.